session. We're not any action here, so I'd like to call this meeting officially to order. I know a couple people will join us late, including Rob and Ruth, so they'll be here soon. So while we're not taking any action today, being that we're, excuse me, a Brown Act committee, we still have to allow for public comment and still have to follow our posted agenda. So please let me pull that up. So here it is. All right, so I've called it to order. We have our community Senate community values, Zoom guidelines. There's so few of us. I'm just screaming through this. Approval of the agenda. There's literally only one item really for us to discuss, and it's all of our experiences at the plenary session. And so here I am at public comment. Is there anyone at this time wishing to make public comment? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone. And so we have no consent items. This is the greatest academic Senate meeting ever. We're now on item 7.1. There again for dissemination and your consumption is the resolutions passed. Ruth will be joining us in a couple of minutes should you have questions about any of those. And now we can move on to item 8.1. So I'd like to mention that while this is an academic Senate meeting, Justina and Brittany are both either chairs or co-chairs of either Senate subcommittees or Senate facing committees. And so they attended plenary as well. And so they are here today as Senate guests and will officially be part of the conversation. So I do not have structured discussion points on purpose because the point of this study session is to basically share out what we all took away from our plenary sessions. I know some of us attended the same sessions. I know some of us attended our sessions that nobody else attended and the like. And so I just want to give opportunity for people to share out what they thought was important. Perhaps suggest changes that we can make as an academic Senate here at SBCC, changes to either our Senate norms, our Senate subcommittees, and basically anything related to what you heard or learned at plenary. So like I said, I don't have structured discussion points for you all. So I'm just going to turn it over to you all and hope that one of you kind of starts off by sharing what you heard, what you learned, what you appreciated, what you're thinking about, and what you would like to see at our campus and in our Senate. Sound good? Anybody want to start us off? I will call on you and force you to talk in a class.
Rayanne, I don't mind starting, but can you go to the document that you provided?
Yep, the resolutions.
No, it was the document you sent to us to put in comments about.
Yes, I'll go do it, Kathy. Just give me 1 second to pull that up.
That's fine. And while you're doing that, there were some fairly significant resolutions that were passed. And we might actually want to spend some time, maybe Ruth will want to talk about some of those. I thought that there were some important ones. The one that, you know, always is brought to my attention because I was on DTAC when we wrote the guidelines, but the Senate passed again a resolution for the Board of Governors to pass the distance education guidelines document. And the important thing about that document is that it defines the 3 different types of online classes, and it gives really good guidance on how to utilize those definitions and what needs to be in the schedule of classes. So I think that's something that will be important to us. I have discussed it before, but we haven't implemented the guidelines because they haven't officially been approved by the Board of Governors yet. But I think it's important for us to think about those in relationship to the types of online classes that we see ourselves doing down the line. We need to be consistent with what the state guidelines will be, just because it's easier for students to navigate through the colleges when everybody's fairly consistent. All I did here in this document is I posted 3 of the PowerPoint presentations of 3 of the presentations I went to. The first one, the non-credit pre-transfer and so forth, that's just a really good presentation on non-credit, particularly for people who are not real familiar with non-credit. And it's really sort of a primer, and I thought it was a really good resource. Zen and the Art of Assigning Disciplines is, again, very interesting. There's a lot of confusion about assigning disciplines to a course and what that means. And so this is really a good presentation on that. You can take a look at it at your own leisure if you care about it. But I think it's really important. Most people don't really know how this works. And there's a way that you can assign disciplines where you have 2 or more disciplines where any one discipline will suffice, or you can have a course where you assign 2 disciplines and the faculty member has to meet the requirements of both disciplines. So there's various ways that this works, and so it's important when you're designing a course or you're redesigning a course that you understand how the discipline process works. And probably the best one as far as new information and helpful information was the Decolonize and Inequity in online education. And so there are a lot of good resources in that particular presentation. Particularly at the end, there's a link to the resources that they talked about. There's some videos in there that were good. It was really a good presentation, and particularly since the curriculum committee, we're going to be, having this equity and diversity work group this summer and trying to bring something to the larger curriculum committee. It was helpful, and one of the really nice articles in there that I thought was very beneficial was, I checked that. I double checked all my links. I can't believe that doesn't work. That really makes me mad. I double checked everything yesterday and it opened up. Wow. I'll go back.
It might be. It just might be.
That's weird. I can go back and double check those and re-link those if I need to, but I checked everything. I checked everything last night again. But anyway, the one article in that link was the article in the most recent rostrum that was sent out. That's the State Academic Senate magazine. And there was an excellent article there on equity in your syllabus. So I would really recommend that maybe we share that with our department members. We just had a workshop with our whole division on Thursday about equity in our syllabus and equity in our course content, because we're going to be doing some pretty major curriculum overhaul. And so we've started that work in our department, but it's a very good article and it's not really long. So I don't know what's happened. I'm really sorry that didn't open up. They all were working just fine last night. So I'll double check everything and send you new links. So that's it for me.
Cool. Thanks for that, Kathy. Jenny, it looks like you have some good notes. Do you want to go next?
Sure. I took some notes on 2 of the sessions I attended, although I attended more than that, but I just didn't take notes on the other, which was more of like a Q&A free form. So I don't know on that, since you have that screen up, Ray, can you go to the top of my notes and I might have you show something else? So really, I mean, one of my takeaways was just that what's happening at the state Senate level, I felt is where our campus is headed, and at least, people on the front line doing maybe some of this work ahead of the rest of the campus is involved in this. I think that the plenary centered around this idea of decolonization as a thread that went through all of the presentations, and then different words end up getting used, anti-racist and equity and whatnot. But this first presentation that's on here, to me, I mean, just really emphasize this idea about meeting our students where they're at and understanding our population of students. And so there's some definition up here about like, what is colonialism, at least how we're using it, I think, in academia in this context. And they said the main tools of colonialism are linguistic and cultural. And so I thought that was very relevant for what we do in education. You know, like, what is the culture of our classroom? What is our relationship to our students' cultures? How much do we share of our culture? What is our campus culture, et cetera? And then linguistically, you know, that just gets to everything from our policies to, you know, how we communicate. And I was gonna, sorry, Ray, you still have that. I was gonna show something. Okay. Okay. So there's that question on here, like the second mini paragraph from the bottom, how to make this kind of decolonization happen in our classroom. And I thought there were a lot of good ideas that people were adding to a Padlet. And there were so many. A Padlet's like a little place where you can just list info together. There were so many ideas that I was just like quickly trying to transcribe in this giant paragraph. And so I think, you know, a lot of us are already doing some of this or dipping our toes in. But I think pedagogically and as a campus, there's a lot here that we can try to work toward in terms of thinking about our campus culture and our classroom culture. And so I was just trying to write a lot of those down. And to me, you know, my summer goal at least, and I know what a lot of us are doing in our English department, is we're trying to work on a few of these things between now and fall to really start implementing them meaningfully. I'll stop there for a sec because I see Ellen's hand. Yeah.
Ellen?
You can finish. I went to this session too, so I was just going to, but you can go ahead.
I think that's kind of it before that AB 705 one. So I think it's a great time for you to jump in, Ellen.
Okay. And I apologize, I haven't added anything to the notes, but I did take notes on this session and a couple others. And this was, I think, probably my favorite session that I went to. It was just so good in a kind of mind expanding way and helping me shift the way I approach some things. So a couple things I wanted to emphasize that one, I think you put towards the end about the focusing on the diversity, not the diversity mind, the problem posing versus banking method of acquiring knowledge, and which I know is not, like, I'm sure we've encountered that before, but the way it was addressed in this session, and probably in some of the examples from the Padlet too, just made me rethink Library 101. And then the other thing that really especially stood out for me with this one was having a collaborative and culturally responsive lens that reflects collective work and collective responsibility, and how to translate that into the classroom. Like, how do we, as a whole class, students and the instructor, share collective responsibility for our own cultural norms of the classroom. Yeah, so I think I'm not sure if if you added the link to the Padlet, but I believe that's still available, so I can add that to the document.
Yeah, can you please? I have it somewhere myself, and I can't find my notes. One thing I wanted to mention is the land acknowledgement and where we're at as a college and where we're at with the Chumash. I wish Anna was here, and she's not, and that's totally okay. But we are at a kind of a weird place with land acknowledgement at our college. So Dr. Goswami, myself, Ana Garcia had a meeting with the Chumash probably a month ago now, and we've been trying to schedule a second one, and we just haven't had time yet. And when I say the Chumash, I mean the coastal band of the Chumash, which is a particular band, and they shared with us that there are about 4 active bands locally. And so they don't, and I just did it just now, they don't necessarily represent the Chumash, they represent the coastal band, of which there are other bands, right? So when they were having these conversations with us, they were being very careful about, this is how we feel, and we really need to bring in the other bands so that you have an idea of what, quote, the Chumash feels. So I don't know how else to say this, so I'm going to be very blunt with my language. And I'm just going to try and summarize the conversation, right? It's my opinion from the conversations I've had with them and further conversations with Anna and things like that. So first of all, we need to understand, they told us to stop using that previous version of the land acknowledgement. So I need everybody's help in saying, when we have our colleagues using it, hey, we don't have permission to use that. With that in mind, I will also offer, please do not put land acknowledgements in your syllabi unless you have content or a conversation around that. If you don't, it's just performative, right? Same thing with like email addresses or meetings, right? So don't be using this land acknowledgement in a way that's just acknowledging the land. Furthermore, the Chumash, the coastal band of the Chumash are not interested in writing a new land acknowledgement for us. They feel very much that if we want to have a land acknowledgement as a college, that we need to do that work ourselves, that it needs to be written by the people on the college, and that the Chumash should not be doing that work for us so that we can use it, right? And Dr. Goswami, I did not realize this, but has a very long resume of working with local Indigenous First People, Native Americans in the different places that he's been at. He actually has very impressive things that he's done. He would like to see the development, and this was just very early on in the conversations, of like a Chumash center on campus. And or he would like welcome signs like at the college entrance of like, now entering Chumash land or something like that. The coastal band of the Chumash were very psyched about those suggestions that he had. They thought that was a really great step forward. And Dr. Goswami said that he doesn't like land acknowledgements himself, that it just seems like that they're lip service. And those of us were in the meeting, including the Chumash, felt very similar. So I know that land acknowledgements are becoming very vogue, and we're seeing like it coming back from even the state academic senate with very good intentions. But I think the fact that we've worked with our local Indigenous, at least one of the bands of them, and they're saying these things to us, I think that it's important that we kind of take these in stride and incorporate them. The other thing that kind of blew my mind when I met with the Chumash and Anna and Dr. Goswami, the coastal band of the Chumash, is one of them said, the Chumash, we don't view ourselves as a land people, we view ourselves as a sea people. And so a land acknowledgement doesn't like necessarily even really represent us. And I found that mind-blowing. And that wasn't something that was overly obvious to me had I not been in a room with them. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, yes, land acknowledgements are becoming very popular, especially on college campuses and around the country. But being that we've had this outside conversation, I think that we should be mindful of what the coastal band is asking of us, and not necessarily use them in the way that we've been doing it. Does that make sense? Questions?
So I wonder if, you know, before summer session and then before fall, there should be another, I don't know, email or something about that, just so faculty remember to take it off their syllabi.
Yeah, I don't really, yeah, I mean, I don't know how to do that so that it feels good. And like, who am I to ask to take that off of the syllabi? Right? So I'm just some person that was in this meeting with them. So I'm still struggling with how to navigate that. I guess that's why I'm trying to share that, like, being that Anna brought this up at the Senate, maybe like it can be kind of a share out informally that way.
But either way, the Chumash don't want that particular, the current land acknowledgement used, right? So
That's right.
so we
That's
still
right.
need to let faculty know that at least.
Yeah. So are you saying that I should send an email out saying that?
I don't know. I don't want to make, I mean, I don't know how to do it. I just,
Yeah.
if they think it's going to bring harm, I just don't want to.
I don't think it's gonna bring, well, I mean, it might bring harm because now that we have people doing it and recognizing that we're on unceded Chumash land, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it is the fact that the Chumash said they do not want us using that previous one. So maybe that does need to be stated very clearly to people.
Clarifying question.
Sure.
The temporary one also was just a temporary one. So so basically there is no land acknowledgement that we
That's
can
right.
use now, correct?
That's
Okay,
right.
good.
Yeah,
That's what I've been telling people. I wanted to make sure that was accurate.
yeah, the temporary one was only to be like used until we met and they understood our intentions. And then once we met, you know, and Mia Lopez, the one who wrote our previous one and then updated it for us again, just saw Anna the other weekend. And, you know, she is very much ready for the college to write our own so that it's our land acknowledgement, right? Robbie?
Well, I don't know. I have one person from my division who really is anxious to get to some permanent one that we can use, and it matters a lot to this person that we use one. And I don't know if I have permission to share their identity, but they're from geology, which is associated with local land. And I wonder, I mean, you just said about how we don't know how to navigate that. I wonder if I should just tell her all of this and to do what she thinks is right.
No, that
What
is
do
not
you
my,
advise then?
okay. So a couple of things. So, I mean, and this isn't on you. I mean, if I need to have a conversation with somebody, I will. So first of all, you know, this isn't about, it's not about any of us. This is about the Chumash, right? So I think going to that idea of like centering who's at the conversation here. So it's not about how they feel and what they want, right? Two, I would offer that geology and local land is an important conversation, and this person should craft their own. And that's all I'm trying to say is what the Chumash wants of us, the coastal band of the Chumash.
That's kind of what I suggested.
And she's not willing to do that?
No, not at all. I was suggesting that as a possibility. I just didn't express it clearly.
Oh, yes. This person should craft their own as an acknowledgement that we are on Chumash land, and have it be from them and have it relate to their course content, which it sounds like it already does, right?
Yeah.
But like, I don't, off the top of my, I mean, I talk about colonialism in chemistry, but like, I'm not doing that in my class. So why do I have this random land acknowledgement? You know, it's kind of like Ana Garcia said, like about our Senate meetings. It's like, we read this thing and then, okay, anyways, over here, right? It's like, why are we doing that? We're doing that like for it's a little bit performative. I mean, I think Ana started this conversation in a really great way, right?
Yeah, I
So,
totally
yeah.
get that. And that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, this person should craft their own. There's, they can even use our previous ones as an example. It should be clear that it's coming from them, that they are acknowledging the Chumash land. I think that that would be the best.
Okay, thanks.
Tara?
Yeah, I just want to add a little bit to this conversation because I do a lot of work with the Chumash bands and specifically in trying to repatriate a lot of the items that are in the Natural History Museum. And I'll just share with you their stance on land acknowledgements. Their stance on land acknowledgements is, why is this not a people acknowledgement? Like you're acknowledging the land, but you're not really, in doing so, acknowledging the people, the culture. And the Chumash, likewise, historically we're a foraging culture. Land ownership is not in a foraging culture's purview. So I totally understand the comment about seeing themselves as sea people. That is very much in line with a foraging-based culture. So I think we had an intention here with land acknowledgements, but the impact has not been positive. Because for the Chumash, they said, wow, you still fundamentally don't seem to understand. And nice try, but you don't seem to fundamentally understand. So I don't know what we do next. I actually really do appreciate Dr. Goswami's idea about a Chumash center on campus. I think that's a better way to go. But what we do in the interim about the now pretty large numbers of faculty who have land acknowledgements in their syllabi, I think we as the Senate need to kind of help to shoulder those conversations.
Yeah. Well, something else that's related to this that wasn't necessarily that came out of the plenary and is only loosely related to a syllabi. Well, it is related to a syllabi. So I won't out this person, but I had a really transformative conversation and check-in with a faculty member last week, a Black faculty member. And something he said about syllabi in particular is, we're going to spend all this time, we're going to decolonize our syllabus, we're going to decolonize this, that, or the other. And then the way we do our classroom is still, how did he say it? I forget the phrase he used. Is still harming students, not physically, right? But like still colonized. And that really struck me, right? Because you can decolonize your syllabus. You can have an inclusivity statement. You can have a land acknowledgement. You can be doing X, Y, Z as if they're boxes to be checked. And I'm saying this without blame. I feel like our campus took add land acknowledgement to my syllabus as like this check in equity to, this box to be checked without reflecting on our practices. And I think you're right, Tara. I think it was really well intended. Like, oh, this is a way to acknowledge Indigenous people, right? And check out how inclusive I'm being. But it was another one of those like superficial things, right? Like if I put this in my syllabus, then it will show that I'm inclusive of, Indigenous people, right? But then we still had these past practices that we didn't move on. So yeah, anyways, Robbie?
This is a difficult topic for a lot of people. And I think if we want to, and I think we should assume a leadership role in this. And part of that is bringing everybody along, including the well-intentioned people who have no idea what to do. In the sciences, there's a lot of discussion of rigor, and I know how loaded that word is. But somebody in physiology will say, well, my discipline is different than English. You can have a million different interpretations of this novel, but this bone is called a femur. And if you call it something else, that's wrong. And you know, and obviously that's an oversimplified or not so inclusive point of view, but a lot of people don't know how to move beyond that. And I barely know, I'll just confess, I'm not an expert in how to move beyond that either. And I think there's a lot of resistance or dismissal to the decolonization idea because people don't know what to do next. Like that really is called a femur, period, right? But they were never, they were trained on being physiologists. They were not trained on how to do the work that we're asking them to do in a lot of cases. So I think that needs to be said in conversations like this. Like we will get more people doing this work if we can provide a little guidance about how to do this work.
I mean, yes. And I'm a little frustrated because there is a lot of guidance on this. And I think that people balk and they confuse decolonization with not naming the femur the femur.
But that's what I mean by guidance. Like they don't know what the next step to take is. Like I don't want to solicit, you know, I'm maybe badly summarizing a lot of things I've heard. I don't want to solicit my students' opinions on what this bone should be called.
That's not what decolonization is.
I know that, but a lot of people don't. That's what I'm saying. And so I think, you know, there is literature out there, but we're all super busy. And I think that if we as an academic senate want to improve this thing in our academics on this campus, I feel like there's more sort of support we could provide.
So you know that saying, and I see the hands going up, so clearly there's discussion around this and responses, but I just want to offer one viewpoint, and I'm going to start off by saying that like two things can be true at once. So one of the two things that can be true at once is the academic senate should be taking an active role on supporting our faculty in this way. And I think that we're still going to be, okay, no, let me start that differently because I don't want to be a defeatist. And I think that there has already been a lot of professional development around this at our college and elsewhere. And I think that sometimes people don't want to understand the difference between decolonizing your pedagogy and rigor. I'll also add that it is okay to, let's say, not okay, but like, yeah, it's okay. It is okay to have certain white supremacist like pedagogy in your classroom, because that is what you were taught in. And it's this idea of flying the plane while dismantling it, while rebuilding it, right? So like, for instance, as a chemistry teacher of 136 plus students at once in a lecture hall, non-COVID times, I am going to lecture on the stage. That is a very colonialistic way of teaching. And that is what works for me, right? But I'm going to do these other things, right, to decolonize the space. So, you know, I would offer to our colleagues, Robbie, who are arguing a femur as a femur, like they're just not getting it. And they're going to need to go through more professional development to get it, I guess, or they're not going to, and that's okay too, I guess, right?
Well, so, yes, and I'm saying this because, I mean, a lot of what you hear is not specific to the sciences, and people aren't, a lot of our colleagues are not, I guess they're not willing to take the steps that a lot of us here in this space will take. They're not creative about how they apply what they've learned. I mean, I've heard things like this even from people who've been to professional development things. Like you hear a lot of concepts and you don't hear a lot of practical ways to apply it in the classroom. And you certainly never hear what you just said, which is that I'm going to stand up there and talk, and that's a white supremacist thing, and that's going to be okay for my class, and I'm doing all this other stuff. A lot of people view it, I think, as an all or none thing. Well, I lecture, so I guess I'm fucked. And then they just shut, sorry. And then they just turn off. Then they're no longer receptive to things. I'll stop talking now.
I mean, I would argue that this is part of white fragility. And I'm seeing shakings of heads. So like, clearly I'm saying something, right? Like black and white thinking, right? Both, I mean, this is all this stuff that I heard from Crossroads and other anti-racism training. I mean, if they just want to shut down and say, this is how I'm going to do it, and I'm not doing those other things, okay, fine, so do it, right? I mean, and I'll also say, you know, Pam and I'm going to call Pam out. Pam and I, as a science instructor and a math instructor, have also said, gee, you know, I go to these pedagogy seminars and, you know, this one was for bio and it just didn't work for chemistry. And this one was for this and it wasn't working for me for math. So you know what Pam and I did? We both attended one, we took notes and we shared it with each other. And I was like, whoa, Pam, I love that. I'm going to do that. And she was like, whoa, Ray, good job. Like, I didn't even think about it like that. Right. Like, that's what you do. So like, I'm sorry that like the answers aren't like Googleable for like our colleagues, but like, you know, rise to the occasion or not, I guess, you know, and like, you know, lean on each other. Like, I feel like I've been beating a drum with the science division for a while. Like, hey guys, I'm going to this webinar. Hope other people can come. Okay, bye. And then nobody comes with me, right? So it's like, why can I speak to some of this now? Because I took the 10 hours to go to 10 different webinars. And a lot of them did waste my time. And I'm still going to keep going, right? It's like a puzzle to figure out. Okay, I'm going to stop talking. Jenny, Ellen, Justina, and then Kathy.
Thanks. When Robbie was making that comment, I did reflect back to the plenary and the fact that this issue of STEM and how STEM handles or approaches all of these ideas came up a lot. So, and I think Ray, you even brought it up at one session I was at with you, either verbally or in the chat, you know, that it is sometimes challenging to maybe get certain disciplines on board. And it might be, you know, in the STEM area where there is maybe, you know, objective answers and a concern about rigor. To me, it's not so much like challenging the idea that this is a femur bone. You know, it is still a femur bone, but how you get the students to learn or understand and remember it's a femur bone is where the creative work comes in. And the more we can get faculty to explore creative ways to do that, the better. Sometimes the terminology like decolonialism can be off-putting or scary to people, and so they might recoil. And so I think we don't always have to use the terminology if it's going to be too off-putting to people. I think what's still important and interesting, and that came across for me at that session, was if you look at those Padlet suggestions, the way that they are getting us to think about decolonialism in our classroom is by considering our processes by which we get students to learn material. And all those Padlet discussions were really student-centered, student-initiated, student-empowered, students do the work, right? Have students bring this in, have students share this, have students work on that. Less about professors going to lecture it at you and you're gonna bank it and therefore you've learned it. So I think that's where the creative piece is that people have to become more open to. And it just always, it reminds me of when I was at a Scala years ago, and they said, you know, whoever does the work does the learning. And to me, what was in those Padlet suggestions and came out of that session was when the students do the work, they do the learning, as opposed to the professor doing the work and expecting that the students learn it. And that's the colonialist perspective, right? Is that I will save you, I will teach you, I will change you. Whereas the other model would be a flattening of that paradigm, and you get students to learn in a way that's going to make sense and empower them and be inclusive.
Yeah, I've also found science, anti-racism pedagogy a very hard field to break into, because it's my opinion that science is very much Western and white and patriarchal. So of course, I think it makes perfect sense that scientists and mathematicians are going to go, we can't do this. There's only one way to do this, right? I think that makes perfect sense with the culture that is science, because I mean, and for anybody to say, I can't talk politics or race in science, I think just isn't trying hard, right? From Tuskegee to eugenics to, you know, lack of inclusion in science. I think that people just aren't thinking because they don't have to. Ellen, Justina, Kathy.
Ray, you and Jenny both just said a lot of the things that I was thinking. So I'll try not to repeat those. But one is, I think one of the things that really resonated with me was, Ray, when you said, you know, this is white fragility. And I think maybe saying that to a colleague who's resistant and saying, you know, there's no way to do it in my discipline is not the best way to go about it. But I think dealing with it on that level, rather than like, we can have the argument forever about whether this is possible in your discipline, but let's get at what is behind that resistance on a personal level. So I think that is one thing that's important for us to do. And then I also think that being transparent with students, like if we're doing like, okay, this thing I'm going to teach in a lecture format, to acknowledge like, this is not the only way of teaching in this course. This is not the only way of teaching that exists. This is imperfect. Our whole system of higher education is set up in imperfect ways that are based on colonial structures. And like, how deeply we want to get into that might be different. You know, as a social scientist, there's maybe more room for that in the social sciences. But I think there are still ways that we can critique the structures that we're working with, even as we're working with them. Like just one example, in Library 101, and sometimes in research workshops for other classes, is teaching students how to work with subject headings and controlled vocabulary, and also at the same time teaching how problematic they are. You will have a better time finding sources if you know how to use subject headings, and I'm not going to present them in this, you know, so-called neutral way that's just, you know, here's what they are, as if these categories exist and arose from nature somehow. Like, humans created these, and there are problematic reasons why there's a subject heading for female physicians, but not for male physicians. You know, so I think we can, like you said, Ray, it's not an all or nothing thing. And I think this is something those of us who are white often do whenever we're faced with dealing with our own complicity in white supremacy, is we set that standard. Like, either we completely operate outside of this system and, you know, don't participate in it, or that's too hard and it's impossible for me to do, so I won't do anything. And I think we need to I just think there's ways that we can all find ways to chip away at that plane as we're flying it, and rebuild it as we're flying it. And also there's no guidance on this thing. It's just, I'm sorry, we all have graduate degrees, or most of us do. Like, do your research. I'll help you with that.
Justina?
Yeah, for sure, Ellen. That just pisses me off. I'm like, dear God, do some fucking research. But yeah, so just to add to this, like I've been really lucky this semester to be working on 2 different projects with people that are in this space right now. One of them is a much smaller project in which Ellen and Tara have been a part of. And the other one's a little bit bigger, and Pam and Brittany and Robin and Tara have been a part of this. And my takeaway from both of these, like I've got this really tangible, like kind of clear path here, is that first, we have to do what Ellen just said, and like we have to help white people understand that personal part behind this. Like that fragility will just make it impossible for them to get over that. And Tara and Ellen and I have been working in this project that I think is kind of highlighted for me, like some of the ways that we can be effective there. And then the second takeaway from this other FIG that some of us have been a part of is that for the sciences, like I used to be kind of dismissive when scientists were like, oh, this is really hard for us. And I was like, oh, you're just not trying. But like, I've been trying to listen better, and I'm like, oh, okay, like I get it. It is really, really hard for your discipline. And the thing that we found being quite effective for even people that came into this work really resistant was getting them to think about the real life practical applications of their discipline. And I know, Ray, you've kind of said this already, but like it was really kind of like, Tara can speak to this a little more, but it was eye-opening to see how that was a path into this work for some people that had been resistant, because they had never managed to stop and think, wait, my discipline is something that students go and take and like apply to the world, and there's like ethical implications to this. So we encourage, thank you for laughing at that, Robin, that we encourage, these science disciplines to think about like, what would happen if you added an SLO around the ethics of your discipline? And suddenly that opened up a conversation that they had never thought of having before. And some people were making some really good progress on that. So I just wanted to kind of like add, like, I think that there's some evidence here from like some work that's being done this semester that like those could be 2 like decent pathways forward in trying to get some people that are resistant to actually be on board. So.
Kathy, and then Tara.
So as you can imagine, physical education is unique in a lot of ways, but we took on the challenge. We had 2 of our teachers who have been trained as coaches, Ellen and Sandrine, who did a really great presentation for us. It was not off-putting. The language was not accusing us of being anything or something that's, a hot topic word. And it was very inclusive. And it was the point was to help our students be successful. And this article I mentioned, this article that was in the rostrum on decolonizing your syllabus, an anti-racist guide for your college, I'm looking at it right now, and it has implementing anti-racist pedagogy. It's just really basic things that we all should be doing anyway. And it just helps make this whole thing seem reasonable to everybody. And not that we're doing the wrong thing, not that we're bad people, but how can we be more inclusive? How can we look at our students and really work to make sure they're all going to be successful? The other thing I did is I did a deep dive into our data in Tableau. And when you start looking at your data in Tableau as a department, as a course, as a faculty, which the faculty can do their own deep dive. You can have Z come to your department, do a little training, and you can look at the success rates of all the different groups of students, and you can, there are multiple categories where you can look at the data, and it's very, very interesting. And sometimes when you see in black and white that a certain group of students are not succeeding in your classes consistently, you begin to think, oh my God, what can I do to help them? And it takes the whole racist thing maybe and puts it in a proper place, which is not up in your face, but actually gives you the tools and the desire to want to make a change. So if we can do it in PE and athletics, anybody can do it. And the science people can do it. And it isn't about what a femur is or what it isn't. It's really about making sure those students feel included, that there's multiple ways and flexibility in communicating with them, that you're including things about scientists, women scientists, scientists of color. How are you infusing that kind of information into your courses? And it's not that they're not going to learn how to identify bones, because in our discipline, that's critical. Bones and muscles and biomechanics is the secret to success. But how are you presenting that material? So I think it's doable, but I think each department maybe is going to have to do it in their own way.
Thanks, Kathy. Tara, and then Anna.
Thanks, everyone. I don't want to keep hammering away at this because I know we have other things to talk about, but I do just want to add here that part of what it means to decolonize your class is not simply peppering in a more diverse set of voices or examples, but it's also to take a very hard look at how you value certain skills and undervalue others, how you value certain types of voices and undervalue others. And that means that each of us, regardless of our discipline, needs to critically re-examine our assessments. How do we decide what an A is and what a B is? What are your metrics for success for your students? And we currently have an education system that we think has been around forever, but in reality, it's really born out of colonialism and racism. And it's this toxic form of individuality. It's this toxic form of ranking and sorting your students into categories. That's what we're talking about here. And we need to find ways of breaking down those barriers. And it begins in the classroom. It absolutely does. So I just want to put onto everybody's minds, yes, including an inclusivity statement is good. Yes, including more examples of diverse voices in your course content is good. But then take a real critical look at how you're assessing students. And I think, part of what we do at Academic Senate is to make sure that we are helping to provide the resources for instructors to learn how to do that, because we all have to unlearn how we were taught and how we even value the learning process. I will admit, as a student, I became obsessive with grades. I did. And then the first time I got an A+, then it's like I wanted that every single time. And I worried a lot less about what I was actually getting out of the class than what turned up on my report card at the end. So I think assessment is the key here. It crosses across all disciplines. And that's part of the decolonizing process.
And I think that was what I was getting at earlier, and you said it in a much more applicable way and much more accessible way when I shared that comment of, you can do whatever you want with your syllabus. You can pepper in, different examples, and you can talk about XYZ with your content. But then if you still have colonized ways of assessing or colonized ways of this, right, then you're going to get the same results, right? I think it's important to realize that, at least with the science, with science, if it's very Western, very white, very patriarchal, it's going to take a lot to change that, because the system sets up the new system so that it replicates itself, right? We are really, really, really good at making at least here in the States, I would argue like white male scientists and like Asian male scientists, right? Whether they be international or Asian American. We're really good at that. And then we keep going, why don't women want to go in the sciences? Or why is there the, you know, the leaky pipeline that we keep talking about in engineering, right? And it's like, or computer science is another one. And it's like, because the system is replicating itself, right? And then like the women that do quote succeed are the ones that operated really well within that system and could navigate it, myself included, right? So yeah, and so I'm going to replicate it now for the next generation. I'm trying to disrupt that, but I think that that's why so many of us are so, you know, what do we do? How do we do this? Anna, you're up.
So I joined super late in the conversation and I'm trying to catch up on what exactly is being discussed, and I haven't, so I'm not gonna speak to that. But what I wanted to just name in this space is a lot of what I keep hearing is prioritizing the comfort of white folks and making it digestible for white folks. And I just wanna put this into the room, like, these systems are harmful and hostile toward people of color and specifically Black folks and queer LGBT folks and all of these other folks that are in the margins, and nobody seems to care about that. So it's totally okay to operate in these systems and try to dilute the content to make it digestible for white folks. And I understand like where that might come from, but I couldn't sit here and listen to the conversation and not name how harmful it is for people to sit in conversations like this and hear that. So again, I'm not sure, I'm too late for the full context to weigh in on the content piece of it, but when I popped in here, I just heard prioritizing white people's comfort, which is par for the course, status quo, standard, and that's harmful.
It was in reaction to me saying that when faculty don't like something, it has to do with white fragility, Anna. So yeah, white fragility all the way. Robin?
Yeah, I was kind of processing a reaction that I had to something that was said, and Anna just made me realize that I needed to say something about it, that when we make a statement like keeping racism in the proper place, which is not in your face, that it puts it right in the face of the people who are suffering from racism. And I do think that racism and anti-racism work belongs in our face. I just wanted to speak to that because when we say something like that as white people, I think what we're saying is exactly what Anna just said, prioritizing the comfort of the white people in the room, not to have racism in their face, versus the people who live with it in their face every day. So I just wanted to speak to that.
Yeah, thanks for that, Robin. And Ruth, when Anna was speaking, said thank you, yes. So, okay, so a lot, do we need to process that any further? Before I move on? I didn't mean to.
Yes, you do, but maybe not in this space.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure that we're going to solve it necessarily here, but I do think that like Justina and Sarah and Tara and the FIG have, you know, come up with some ways to engage some science faculty a little more on this. But I don't know what I'm trying to say. I find it quite challenging to get movement on this, and I don't know how we do it. And again, you know, maybe bigger than can be done in this afternoon, but I do think it's something to somehow digest or come up with more strategies, or otherwise many people end up being sort of isolated in their departments in working on things like this.
So I'll share something, and Justina, I hope you don't mind me giving this example of our conversation, but I was in a meeting with Justina and Sarah and other people, and we were talking about the good work that is being done around SLOs. And I was very resistant, and Justina can tell you that this is true. I am very resistant to investing more time, energy, and headspace into SLOs. And one of the things that I said to Justina in this meeting was, I'm not interested in reinventing SLOs or trying to make them work, because we've been trying to make them work for a while and it's just not working. And I would argue SLOs are born out of the white supremacy system. So how do you make something born out of that work in that way? I do not think you are going to, because it is fundamental, like from the gate, it is fundamentally like part of it. So, you know, I mean, I also got in trouble, not from Justina for saying that, because how can the academic senate president say that, right? How can the academic senate president not like SLOs? And I mean, I guess I just have to like accept that I'm trying to think beyond SLOs, right? And I hope that we all are thinking beyond the SLOs. It's not SLOs, it's how we do things. It's not our syllabus, it's how we do things, right? So I don't know, but you know, where does this is where the academic senate can take the lead on some of this. We have to do SLOs, but how do we bring the stuff that we learned at the plenary session to campus? How do we do that?
Is it okay if I jump in real quick? Right?
Absolutely, I totally attacked your work, so please.
No, I mean, it's what I'm really wrestling with, and this is the question I was going to start out with about the session that Jenny took notes on and started this whole conversation. Was I'm really wrestling with this question of like, you guys, honestly, everything's born out of white supremacy that we do in academia, like absolutely everything. Like history was used as state propaganda. Like the English, like, you know, like science was produced out of like the Enlightenment, right? So like, do we chuck it all? You know, like, so how do we do more? Like Tara and I have talked about this, and Robin too has been on this conversation of like just bringing in people of color into the margins decenters nothing. You know, it just makes it look like more colorful, right? So like it's really mind-boggling. Like how do you do that? But I think to Anna's point, what I've struggled through the semester with this FIG was like there was so much pushback from some of the science people early on. And again, I just want to give Tara credit for taking so much of the brunt of that in our FIG. And there was this moment where Tara and I and Sarah were like, okay, fuck this. We're not going to mention racism anymore. We're going to try to take this route where we kind of like sneak in and we just try to, you know, like get them to be better teachers. Like that's how bad it was. And then like our impulse went to that place, Anna. Like I got to admit that like there was this moment where I was like, okay, to try to reach the white people, I'm going to do things that make them feel more comfortable. But we ended up not taking that approach, and we really kept it in their face. Like, this is about decentering whiteness. This is about decolonizing. This is about anti-racism. We brought in like just so much stuff that you couldn't not see it through that lens. And so here, like, I'm not trying to defend SLOs in any way. I'm just trying to like strategize with all these brilliant minds of like, what's the best approach? What's the best on-ramp for people? And what I ended up finding with the SLOs is this is a very concrete, tangible entry point for a lot of people. because it directly gets at the pedagogy in their classroom through both their objectives, like what the hell is it that I want my students to learn, and how do we assess those SLOs? So that was why I think that there's some merit in taking that approach. Like, it ended up working for a number of people. So I keep thinking, and I can't remember who the hell said this. I think it was Audre Lorde, who was like, you can't deconstruct the master's house with the tools that the master used to construct the house. I'm like, yes, but dear God, every single tool that we have as academics came from the master's house of white supremacy. And so like, I'm not really having solutions here, but it, like, Anna, I want to say, like, I hear you so much there that like, and I need to be checked constantly. Like, am I doing this to make white people feel comfortable, or am I doing this because I realize this is a good entry point for white people? Like, this is something they can digest in that moment, and then we can, you know, we can move forward. We can move the needle a little bit. So like, that's the space I'm in right now, is like I think we found some good ways to get more buy-in. But Anna, I'm really worried. Like, you are my accountability partner. And if you're feeling like this is something that's still centering whiteness, right? It's just making it look more colorful, then that needs to be said loud and clear, and we need to hear that. And again, Anna, like, I know you weren't here for like the beginning context of it, and you and I haven't talked extensively about this FIG, but like, I appreciate the pushback, and I appreciate the way that Rayanne has contextualized it. So I don't know if any of that's helpful.
I think it's also important. So I think this is I feel like we're talking about students for a second, but I think there's a hint of this that's also like, how do we support people of color on campus that aren't students? How do we do a lot of this work? I think one big solution, and it's going to be slow going, and not just a solution, I don't mean to say that, but like, one thing that we need to do is we need to hire faculty of color. And there's lots of reasons why we need to do that. And I'm not saying that just hiring for quote diversity means that we're going to have people that have decolonized minds, right? Because that's not necessarily the case. I'm offering it for a number of reasons. One of them being like, so that like our students, our instructors match our students. There's lots of things that show that that's important. But also because, like, I'll share again, that meeting I had last week with a Black faculty member, this person shared, like, I just want to show up and do my job. I don't want to have to sit on equity committees. I don't want to have to constantly teach white people. I don't want to have to be the one person that can do this job because I'm, you know, I don't want to be the only one that's on a hiring committee because I happen to be Black. Like, he just wants to show up and just like be a teacher, right? And so I think that we all need to keep that in mind as we sit on hiring committees. There was an entire session at the plenary, to bring it back to that was dedicated to this, right? Our own Senate has that ad hoc committee that's dedicated for that. And it's not hiring for diversity so that it's more colorful, like as you all are saying, it's so that for a lot of reasons, and a lot of the reasons that we're talking about, right? So how do we make bigger impacts on our students? Time and time and time again, it's shown that we hire for diversity. And so I'm just going to say that we recommended unanimously last week at Senate to endorse the recommendations coming from our ad hoc committee. They're currently updating RAP, and we'll bring that back probably to the summer Senate. And as senators, we're going to have to sit and reflect when they have certain procedural policy changes and how we're triggered by them, right? Anna brought forward an AP about academic renewal, right? And how are we reacting to that? So, yeah, I just want us to think about this stuff because, you know, Ibrahim Kendi's book talks about like law changes, right? And we're a Senate and we can impact policy changes. And I think committees and policy changes aren't a very like feel good way of fixing some of the stuff we have on our campus, but like it can help, right? And it won't feel good instantly, but it's the long game that we got to play if we're committed to what we say we're committed to doing, right? So that's just one thing I want to mention in this meeting too. Okay, other things, other stuff to talk about. Anna?
Again, missed the whole meeting, so if this already came up, my bad. But I went to several sessions that were addressing like the makeup of a Senate in terms of like positions. I know we have the bylaws thing coming up, but I feel like there was a lot of very rich discussion around just like the Senate body and its makeup and its rules and how it operates. Even thinking about like Robert's rules and how that's used. And obviously it was created to silence people. The whole process is silencing people, including people at the table. So it's, yeah, I think there's lots of exploration that can be done around that. I thought I saw you send out a email, Ray, about all these notes compiled. I took my own notes and have them as well, so I can share them with you or can add them to that. But I think thinking about membership, thinking about overlapping membership, thinking back to our last couple of meetings and some of the miscommunications that have come up because of people serving in multiple roles and being unclear about who I'm talking to and when and why, all of that stuff matters. And it's all totally rooted in white supremacy and, you know, the power hoarding. Many of the folks in this room did Crossroads. I know you got that Tema Okun article about the characteristics of white supremacy. And right now, all of our leadership systems are fully steeped in the majority of those. So I would really like to expand our discussion on Senate about how we are operating. And, you know, I think there's been some progress in diversifying membership and who's serving and all of that stuff, but it's not always a safe place to exist when you're not part of the majority. So just naming that all out there.
Pam?
Oops, sorry. You know, what have we had, like 18 months online and I still can't figure out what's raising my hand or clapping. But anyway, I want to back up what Anna is saying. Like, this is my first year on Senate. I've been on campus 20 years, been involved in a lot of things. And if I weren't on steering, I'm not sure I would have felt. And even there were times, I know I talked a lot, but there were times when I didn't feel comfortable speaking up because I wasn't sure about process. And I'm an old white lady at the table, right? So like I have lots of different, and the steering member, you know, positional power, whatever. And there were still times when I was like, am I allowed to say this here? Or do I have to wait? Or is this a discussion item? Or is this I don't know. So I think if you think about the effect that the structure had sometimes on me being new to the table, and then I know getting criticism that there were the same people talking all the time at Senate. And I think, well, sometimes other people might not be sure what they're allowed to say or not say in that structure, right? So I agree with Anna that we should consider a way to make the space feel more inclusive and consider the structure in which, you know, do we have to use Robert Rules of Orders? Are there some other things we could use? I don't know, but I think that I think sometimes people who aren't used to that system feel uncomfortable speaking up because it might not be the right time or right thing or whatever.
Well, we don't have to use Robert's rules. That is something that is in our bylaws, and we own our bylaws. Maybe it's in our Constitution. I can't remember, but like that is a decision that Senate's before us made. There are other things that we can use. So for instance, we could do, well, and first of all, I think it's important to say we do pseudo Robert's Rules of Order. We don't even follow them, right? And we kind of do what we want, like in our own norms when we want and when we have done it, but we don't actually do Robert's Rules of Order. I'll share with the group right now that Senate took a survey. All governance groups took surveys. And one of the complaints was somebody, a single person, made the comment that they didn't like that the president kept sharing her opinions, and that the president's not supposed to have opinions, which isn't true at all. And I actually reached out, and I know it's not true because I reached out to the Academic Senate listserv and asked and said, I received this feedback. I'm wondering what to do with it. Like, I don't think I can be a president and not share my opinion. Like, how do you all like navigate this? And 2 people responded with, well, if Robert's Rules of Order are what you're using for your meetings, you just have to pass the gavel after blah, 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 blah is made. And I was like, whoa, we don't even use a gavel, right? So I was like, holy crap, like this is like way intense. And like, we don't even really use Robert's Rules, is what I'm trying to say. We use like a reduced form of them. That is something we can explore this summer in the work group. We can talk about it in the retreat. It's something I was almost a little bit anxious about, like, how do I onboard new senators, right? So like last summer, I tried to onboard new senators. I tried to go through the Brown Act. I tried to explain our agendas. I tried to explain them throughout the year, right?
You did a great job, actually. I just want to say the onboarding was awesome. It's just that it's just like with our students, right? Like, okay, so I was at the onboarding, but then when I actually have to put it into practice, I don't remember some of the stuff from onboarding.
Yeah, so I guess where I'm going with this is like, how do we make new senators feel comfortable at the table, right? I always hear that there's a learning curve for Senate. Well, why is that, right? When I was running for academic Senate president, or I've talked to other people, they're like, I don't want to, I can't be Senate president. It takes XYZ. No, it doesn't. These are the stories we tell ourselves, right? So Robert's Rules, we don't have to do like, but we have to figure out what we're going to do and what our new norm is. So if that's a point of contention, we should talk about that, or however you want to say it. Anna's right though. Who is at our table and why? And what position do they hold at our table, right? That's another conversation. Ruth?
Yeah, and bringing it back to the Senate plenary is how we're participating at the state level. That's also important, and how that information is coming back. Who is participating, how many of us are participating, how we're bringing that, both requests for feedback from the state that they want us to take to the college, and any issues that we may potentially want to be taking to the state. We can contribute, we can participate. There were a lot of awesome resolutions. There were a lot of them that we sat through, and even the process of it, like, we don't know. Us as senators, we haven't been informed of this because it's been very few people always being the ones who attend. This knowledge isn't spread. It's not diffused across campus. It's not even diffused across faculty leadership. So I was appointed late, which is nothing against Rayanne, but like, we don't need, we need to start early. So the first thing I told Rayanne was like, we need to assign a Senate delegate day 1, right, for next year. So that way they can start early, and we have time to bring it back to campus. And there's a bunch of different roles, a bunch of different ways we can contribute. There's CTE, there's non-credit, there's online education, there's legislation, there's a new DEI role. There's so many different ways we can participate. And we're not having that communication. We're not influencing the community college system, I think, in the way that we can. And I think for the most part, it seemed like the leadership is on the right path. I mean, look at the theme of the plenary, right? And we need to be contributing to that and bringing that information back to campus and saying, hey, look, the CCC system, we're on that path. Why is SBCC behind, on this particular dimension? Yeah, I just think historically, because few attended, that information wasn't happening, and it's not being, transferred. So it's time to change that.
And to that end, I increased our travel budget for next year, just so everybody knows. I'm worried that the plenaries will now be in person, and so it will cost quite a bit more to send people. But Ruth was at BRAC last week and knows that I requested our travel funds to double. So we'll see where that takes us. We're like the only organization on campus that had their travel increased.
Right.
And it was for this idea of promoting and supporting the work, our work on campus. Okay, we're at time. Is there anything else people want to share for the good of the group? There's tickling going on in my house. My son just fired his grandma. I'm gonna stare awkwardly at you all until you say something.
Did you say he fired his family?
Yeah, my son, if he does something, if you do something he doesn't like, he fires you. You're fired. I promise he has not watched The Apprentice. I don't know where.
I would like to implement this in my home.
Yeah, Brittany?
No, thank you, Ryan.
I hope the plenary, I know we didn't get to talk about different parts, but I hope the plenary overall was a good time, worth it. You took some things, those of you in leadership positions, committee chairs, liaisons, you brought back working stuff. Danielle, did you want to say something?
Not really. I'm emotionally exhausted. My son's been crying. But I'm sorry I missed. It sounded like a really good discussion. I'm sorry I was late. And anyway, if we can keep doing this, just so that I think one of the things for me with us being online is it's been so isolating that it's hard to know what's actually going on campus and what we can do to support each other and support the changes we're trying to make. And hopefully it'll be easier if we're a little bit in person. That's all.
One idea that just came to mind. So the Senate moved to 3 meetings a month next year, which is a lot. But one thing that we might want to consider is 3 working meetings a month and then a study session like this. I feel like Senate is always so product oriented, and it almost doesn't allow for creativity and discussion around like pedagogy, or how do we get things out to faculty, or how do we support this work? But that's asking for even more time. So I don't know how people feel about that. It just like popped into my head of like proper study sessions. Like the board has, yeah, once a month. Go ahead, sorry, Ellen.
Sorry to interrupt. I would love to be able to have more conversations like this.
The only thing I'm thinking is, like, I'm not going to be a senator. Might be something you want to ask when all of next year's senators are together.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about it during like a retreat or something.
Mm-hmm.
Robbie?
Well, I think it would be a great idea to have less structured conversations for all the reasons that we were all just talking about. And I think, and I like the idea of abandoning Robert's Rules of Order, although I think a lot of people will see that on campus, a lot of people on campus will see that as a radical step, and that might be something that study sessions like this could serve as a sort of stepping stone toward, if we decide that's something that we want to do.
I mean, it's only radical in that it's something that SBCC has done forever.
Right. Well, yes and no, but lots and lots. I mean, if you go to city council meetings here in town, they do it. I mean, lots and lots of people do it. It's kind of ubiquitous, but it's important to know that it's not required, and that it has these roots in white supremacy, and that it differentially silences certain voices.
Well, I would argue that it is done lots of places. It's not necessarily ubiquitous. Like, so for instance, other colleges have senates of the whole, right? Where their entire faculty body, every single person is a voting senator, right? And so like, I mean, I would argue that it's ubiquitous at, yeah, Pam's screaming. It's at smaller schools, Pam, usually is where you see
I
that.
was just thinking, can you imagine that meeting and where the hell would you put them all?
I mean, smaller schools do this. I mean, we could have faculty meeting. I mean, we could do this. 8 to 11, we all get in there. We all get one vote, right? I'm not saying that this is what I want. I'm going back to that idea of like, just because we do something at SBCC and just because we've always done it doesn't mean that there's not literally 114 other ways of doing it around the state, right? I don't think abandoning Robert's Rules of Order is that radical. I don't.
I came from a college that was a 10th the size of SBCC, but instead of a Senate, we had what was called the Assembly, which was basically all faculty and classified. It was basically everyone. And anyone could go and speak at assembly meetings. And I mean, that had equity issues as well, because not everyone has the same flexibility to leave their desk and go to a meeting. But I liked that it was, at least in principle, inclusive of more voices. And we did not use Robert's Rules.
Yeah, and I mean, like I was already saying, we already don't use Robert's Rules, right? Like I don't pass the gavel after the second has been made if I want to join in the conversation, right? So like we're already not really using them. I mean, we could just we could do our own like subset of Robert's Rules, but on it, you know, like on us, I mean, I think, you know, we could not have any and just say, raise your virtual hand if you have something to say, right? Like it doesn't have to be that. And also, go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I didn't want to. I just was thinking, it's also like, I think about how much time we waste. I mean, I'm sorry, I guess I shouldn't say waste, but it just seems like there's so much time that's like, wait, is that a second to, wait, are you making a friendly amendment? Wait, we all have to vote, make a motion whether or not we're going to stay later and then vote on that before we can finish this conversation that we might be done within 2 minutes. Like, it does seem like it might save some time too.
Well, here's one thing I want to offer. Yes, it might save some time. Yes, yes, I'll get lemonade, bud. I promise. And all of the other things. Yes. I have to go get lemonade, you guys. Let me offer this. So our meeting ending at a very specific time, which is 5 o'clock, is not in the Brown Act, is not a Robert's Rules of Order thing. That's been a Senate norm. I don't see in Robert's Rules where you have to vote to extend the meeting time. I'll give you an example of where else on campus Robert Rules of Order is used that is also a Brown Act committee. And I'm being recorded, and I'm going to say this, not that I want to model any of my behavior after our Board of Trustees, but for instance, our board does not do that to extend their meetings, right? So that is a norm that we do at the Senate that we don't have to do. And I agree, it wastes a lot of time and I don't really know why we do it, but we've always done it, so we keep doing it. That's not a really good reason why to do something, right? That being said, I'm also concerned about 2 things if we get rid of that and Robert's Rules, and I'll just be perfectly honest. One, if we don't purposely extend the meeting, I can very much see our Senate going for 4-hour meetings. Right? Like the fact that we say we must be done at 5, okay, we're going to extend it by 15 minutes. We have to wrap this up. Acknowledging that that's a white supremacy structure of hurrying things along. And I don't think we'd ever get anything done because people would just wax on.
Well, you also, if you have to, for people with families especially, but even not, but if you have children at daycare, if you are letting the meetings run, that's eliminating a certain number of people who can serve. You know what I'm saying? Like if you're a single parent, you're going to have to go.
Yep. And the second thing I want to mention about Robert's Rules of Order, I'm sure you can all think of recent times and further back times of times we had to review our minutes because something controversial happened and we had to review them very carefully to see what was said and what was voted and who did what, right? One example I have is the 2 summer sessions, right? What did the Faculty Senate agree to? And so if it's not Robert's Rules of Order and it is something else, I do think that we do need to have some kind of clean cut, we're now voting, discussion has ended, we're doing this and then this, right? But I'm open to this. I just drive the car, you all ride in it, right? So if people want to move away from Robert's Rules, I'm totally for that. I'm open to it. I do want to make sure that our notes our meeting minutes are painfully accurate, no matter what we do during the meeting. And that can happen in a number of ways. Mom, get the drinks I want. I gotta get the drinks El Rey wants. Any other comments before I go get the drinks El Rey wants? It's Gatorade, lemonade, and High C, by the way. Healthy, healthy drinks. Okay, so I think we have some things to work on for our summer retreats for sure. Those of you looking forward, please join me on the Senate Constitution Bylaws Committee and restructuring our Senate committees. That's going to be a place where we can do a lot of these changes. And I look forward to these continued conversations for our retreats. Thanks, everyone. Later.